Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Staples and I'm an archivist at the Cincinnati Museum Center. Today I'm going to tell you how to care for your family papers. Because archival collections aren't just in museums and libraries and archives, they're potentially in everyone's home. So first, what are family papers? And family papers can be any number of things. They can be letters, like the photo example on the slide. This is a letter from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, written in 1952. They can be military records, diaries, journals, school records, like report cards are pretty common ones. Sometimes we had family books where the child's photo, school photo for every year, and the mother will write like detailed information about what their favorite subject was. I have one of those as well. Vital records, which are like birth certificates, marriage licenses, sometimes death certificates for if your parents were to care for your great-grandparents or something like that. Religious records like baptismal certificates, confirmation certificates, travel documents and immigration records like passports, naturalization papers, travel journals, scrapbooks, recipes of any kind on small cards, on scraps of paper, written in the margins of books, who knows. And anything special or unique to your family. Pretty much anything that's not a photocopy and that's an original piece of history. And some people already know where all this material is. Maybe there's the family history buff that has it, but other people, they might not know where this stuff is. And that's where I was with my family papers. No one had gathered these up, so I looked in my grandmother's house. She's one of my last living relatives on my mom's side. And I looked in the basement and the attic, in closets, desks, chest of drawers. You never know what's in the back of the underwear drawer. Under beds, outdoor buildings. My grandmother owns a farm, and I found that letter from my great-grandfather to my grandfather in our corn shed, which is almost outside. It barely had a roof on it. So I was lucky to find those before it was completely gone. And a tip is check all boxes, even if they look like they're full of trash or they only have old tablecloths in there. You never know what might be tucked in this nook or that nook. Handling for your family papers, once you do find them, it's important to have a table where you only work on your family papers. You don't also do schoolwork on it or unload groceries or anything like that. And speaking of food, no food or drinks on the table or anywhere near the collections. No matter how careful you are, you will spill something, or it just residue from the last time you ate something is there. Absolutely no pens when working on a collection. Pens you cannot erase, so they're very permanent and you just don't handle pens. Even if they're on the table, somehow something will get marked. Clean hands is also something very vital. We have oils and dirt on our hands that aren't always visible that will eventually show up on the documents years later. Try to keep items flat or support them with folders when you're moving them or when you're handling them. Don't hold something up and go, oh, Grandma, look at this. Look at this. Keep it flat on the table and have the person come over to the table and take a look at it. And then just a good general rule is treat all items as fragile. Even if they don't look very fragile, treat them as fragile and they will last much longer. Gloves should be worn in certain instances. When you're handling photos or when you're handling something very, very dirty, you might want to wear gloves and not cotton gloves. You want to wear latex gloves those might be a little hard to get a hold of right now, of course. So just clean hands are the most important thing, but then gloves for those certain things. And then you can, if you come across something very dusty and dirty, like some of my papers, you can clean items with a soft camel hair brush by just gently brushing them off. And so it's not really cleaning because there's absolutely no solutions that you put on paper, none, nothing. So just gently brush off and be very careful with paper because it can tear or it can catch. So do be careful with your strokes. And then as far as when we're talking about working on personal family papers, you're working on preserving them, not conserving them. Preservation is you prevent or minimize deterioration and damage. It helps prolong the life of your paper, and anybody with training can do it. Conservation is where you treat or repair to reduce the process of decay. You restore it to a usable state, but only professionals do this. It requires a lot of chemistry and a lot of knowledge, and you're more likely to damage something rather than help it if you try to conserve something. So, and then just probably one of the top 10 rules for archives is never do anything that cannot be reversed. So definitely no tape, definitely no glue, and just always think, can this come away from the page? Then you probably don't want to do it. As far as getting started can be a little bit daunting when you have boxes and boxes of paper, sometimes bags of paper, because people just toss old things aside and don't really think about them. So generally you want to start with an inventory where you get an idea of the types of things that you have. If you see groups of materials like, oh, this is everybody's communion pictures or records. This is a large recipe card collection. If you notice any similarities, like, oh, this is all the Johnson family stuff, just so you can get an idea of what you have before you go in and look at every single individual item. While you're doing the inventory, it's helpful to notice if there's any organization to the material. If you see like files that all of these are A and then it goes to B, obviously that's probably alphabetized. If you notice they're in date order, or if there's like a particular subject, like this was a trip to the zoo or something like that. Original order is very important in archives because that's how you get to know the whole story of your items. Just an individual thing, you have the content, but you don't always have the context. So the things that surround it help tell the story more completely. And then rehousing your family papers. Right now, that might be a little bit tricky with getting supplies, but there are definitely basic things that you can do. First is keep the original order. Don't presume that you know better than the people that created these records. They had them in an order that they liked, so keep it that way. A lot of times they're probably not going to be in an order. As much as we make original order a big deal, they've gone through multiple hands and they're in a jumble now. So just some general tips on that is don't mix sides of the family. So if your mother's side and your father's side, don't blend those two together. So if your paternal grandmother had letters that she wrote, don't mix them with ones from your maternal uncle or something like that. Try to keep the families together. Notice handwriting. If you see similar handwriting, that might be a good indication of this was written by the same person if one thing has a name on it and the other doesn't. Try to notice time periods. That'll help you kind of group things together. And if you can identify an individual, try to keep their items together. And then as far as right now, supplies, like I said, might be a little tricky, but you can get just regular office supplies, and a clean office supply is an okay housing for something temporarily while you're organizing it, while some of the getting archival materials might be a little tough right now because some of the companies might be on hiatus. And then clean boxes. If you have an empty file cabinet, that would be okay temporarily. You can stack folders, but just very short stacks because they will fall over. And then permanent housing is acid-free archival grade boxes and folders. I've got a few here. So this is an upright box that you keep the files upright rather than flat. They're a lot easier to flip through and locate the material that you want. So this is the preferred method for a lot of things. But obviously, if it's a scrapbook or if it's another kind of flat item that you would flip open while it's flat, you'd want to keep that in a flat box. And then just fitting everything in the box that's closest to its size, and taking measurements, not too small but not too big because you don't want things to shift around, but you also don't want to crush them. As far as some basic tips for processing your family papers is removing metal paper clips. They can rust, they can dent the paper. Rusty staples are something that you can attempt to remove, but however, if you don't feel confident that you can take it out without ripping the paper, it's best to leave it. I definitely would recommend a staple remover and going very slowly and very gently. It's very easy to go and it's over with. And then rubber bands are awful. They dry out and become sticky and they will just glue onto your paper. So removing those where you find them is good. Again, if it's very stuck to the paper, don't rip it off, leave it alone, and you can try to get help with it later. Again, don't ever do anything that you can't reverse. And then writing on the folders rather than actual items. Making notes, I make tons of notes in my family papers, and I wrote all on the folder. I didn't write on the actual items. And then when you come across things that are folded or rolled, very gently unfold them and unroll them. If they do not want to unfold or unroll, do not force them. The paper will break and crack. And then if it does unfold pretty easily, don't run your fingers along the fold or fold the paper back in the opposite direction, because even if the paper feels supple, it will crack and it will break on you. Over time, paper fibers will relax, so if you can get it to unfold and put it in a folder, it'll become flatter over time, so you don't have to worry about being as flat as possible. And then if you do have an item that just absolutely will not unfold, get professional help with it. Don't try to do it yourself. And then second, processing your family papers. Items that are similar can go in the same folder. So if you have multiple recipes from your maternal grandmother, they can go along with each other in a folder. You don't have to put each individual recipe in a folder because ordering 1,000 folders can be a little bit expensive. But it's important not to overfill a folder. You don't want the paper to fall out when you take it out of the box or anything like that, and you don't want it to like poke too much over. And then you want to try to isolate damaging material. So anything that's yellow or brown, it's probably very acidic and it will leach onto the other paper that is surrounding it. So you want to put something like that in its own folder. You don't want it to ruin other items. Anything that's sticky, if it's sticky, it will stick to other things. So definitely isolate anything sticky. And then moldy items, you definitely don't want those anywhere near other items. Even if you put them in a separate folder, the mold could spread. So definitely set moldy items aside. And then one of the last things that you want to do is write a description of the items in the folder on the folder. As you can see in my picture, I have here that this is my mother, Karen Shepherd's Catholic baby book. And it's got a lock of her hair in it. And also a little bit further down on the photo is the date that I think the baby book was put together. Special challenges when it comes to your collections. Photographs are definitely special when it comes to archival collections. You want to handle them with gloves to prevent your fingerprints and oils from changing the emulsion on the photo. If you can't get a hold of gloves, handling the photos by the edges is the next best thing. And also keeping them flat on the table, not holding them up and showing people, having people come over to take a look at them. As far as the types of photos, they can help you date the photo that you're dealing with, and you can definitely look up online all the descriptions for these different types of photos. Daguerreotypes and ambrotypes and tintypes are a little rare and they're very old. The likelihood that everybody would have those is probably slim, but cartes de visite and cabinet cards are pretty common. And then you can see here in my boxes that I have black and white portraits and snapshots. I do have some Polaroids, especially color photos, depending on the era that they were taken. Some of them can fade to interesting colors, like the reddish ones from, I believe, the 70s. Those are a good time indicator on those. And then visual cues, obviously, my little great-grandparents that you can see in the bottom photo, that was taken around probably the 20s and 30s based on their dress. As far as putting photos in a folder versus placing them in a polyester sleeve, the little photos at the bottom folder I have placed in clear sleeves because they're small, and putting them in a big folder, they might kind of rattle around more. Also, clear sleeves helps your family members be able to handle them without being, you know, worried about fingerprints as much. And also you can write directly on the sleeves rather than write on the photos. If you do choose to do folders and you do want to write on the photos, like when you identify someone, it's best to write on the back edge of the photo, because no matter the pen you choose, which archival ink is important. I have the Identi pen, but also, oh shoot, I forget the other brand. That's good. But you never know when it might bleed through eventually. So always on the edge of the photo. As far as scrapbooks are another special challenge when it comes to your family papers. They tend to have a lot of acidity issues. The pages of the scrapbook themselves can usually be very acidic. They can get kind of crumbly, or they can be very brittle. Their items in the actual scrapbook can also be acidic, like newspaper clippings or just any number of things that have been glued into the scrapbook. If something looks very yellow or brown, or it's being transferred onto the next page, go ahead and slide a piece of plain copy paper in between the two pages, and that'll help with preventing migration. As I said before, there's lots of glued and taped items in scrapbooks, and you'd be surprised, some items fall out while others just hang on for dear life. It's tempting to try to remove some items. Do not try. If they're holding on, they're not coming off. And then never retape or re-glue items back into a scrapbook. Never. No glue or tape ever when working on an archival collection. Any items that have fallen out, you can place in a folder and then write the detailed information on the folder of where you think they came from in the scrapbook. Some people are tempted to take scrapbooks apart, but I very much discourage this. You lose too much of the story and context when you do that. But some scrapbooks are just so delicate and are already kind of falling apart. Reduce handling those as much as possible. Do not pass them around to family members if they're in rough shape. That would be a very good idea to digitize those so you can share them and, you know, preserve them that way, and then put it in a box and don't touch it. And it'll last as long as it can. And then just some other tips. When you have your finished family papers, You probably don't want to put them back to where you found them because you probably found them in, you know, moist basements, hot attics, or just shoved in a bag in a closet. So you want to put them somewhere that's away from light, that's away from heat or water sources, and that's at least 6 inches off of the floor. This is just light fades paper. Heat will warp the paper, make it more brittle. Water is obviously, if paper gets wet, it molds and just can get very mushy. And then just 6 inches off the floor, just in case there is a water emergency in your house, it will be less likely to be damaged. And then when you're sharing your family papers, definitely be careful moving boxes. You want to try to move them flat and not tip or tilt or move them in any way that is a little different than when they're standing on the shelf. And you want to, when you're having all your family over and you're showing them all your family papers, I'd limit the number of boxes and folders that you have pulled out, because things can very easily get jumbled, and no one means to do it, but it's just very easy to do. And then after you have all your folders with your detailed information written in your boxes, go ahead and type that up. It helps keep things in order, and it allows you to make extra notes that maybe you don't have room to write on the folder. And as you talk with your family and learn more things, you can add to the typed list of your family papers. And then as far as if you do need a conservator, the American Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works has a conservator locator on their website, so you can find one local to you, and they can help you with your tough items that you are afraid to handle on your own. And then, of course, you can always ask an archivist. Cincinnati Museum Center has multiple archivists, both in paper and photo. University of Cincinnati, public libraries. Archivists aren't maybe widely known, but we're a lot of places. And I know we'd be happy to help. That is all I have. So I will open it up to questions.
Hey, Sarah, first of all, great job. What kind of advice would you have for like slides, projection slides?
As far as slides can definitely be tricky. If you go on one of those archival sites that I recommended, they have 3-ring binder polyester sheets that you can slide the slides into the individual pockets to help preserve them. I have a collection of family slides that have gotten wet, and so they're moldy and dirty, and I'm going to attempt to save them. I'm not sure how far I'll get, but being careful and just trying to brush off with a little bit of a brush is the most that I would do. As far as if they're really bad, then that would be where a conservator would come into play.
Yeah, we've been trying to digitize a lot of ours because so many of them are in just, you know, questionable shape, and the long-term stability is unlikely for a lot.
Yep. So, and digitizing would also make them easier to view, because not very many people have slide projectors anymore. So that might be a good way to share them with your family and everything too. Anybody else? I'm such a nerd. I ordered multiple sizes of brushes because you never know when there might be a little crack to get into. And if no one's gonna ask questions, this is a little close up on the archival sleeve. This particular brand, the whole top opens up, so it's easy to remove the photo. But the whole idea behind plastic sleeves is that you don't have to take it in and out, and you can handle it without gloves, without, you know, being too worried. And I'm doing bad things. I'm not holding it flat, but I just want to show it to you guys. And of course, it's wonderful when photos have written on who it is, but this is why I like to write on the actual sleeve, because this is the original writing of my great-grandmother, and I don't want people to confuse what I've written on records to what the original people wrote. And that's also important with scrapbooks. If you have someone that has written on the scrapbook, like this is the Ardennes Forest in 1918. You want that to be the original writing. You don't want to identify something and write it on the scrapbook. That would be something that you can make note of on your typed document and say it was on page 23 of the scrapbook. And I definitely encourage people to go through their family papers because you learn so much. I didn't know that my great-grandfather was the clerk of courts for Greene County. And when I found those letters, it was right on top of the stationery. And it can be kind of difficult looking through family photos because after a generation or two, you have no idea that that was a cousin. It could, you know, just stranger. But you never know when you find that one photo with the name written on the back, and then you can go through and go, oh my gosh, that's the same person. It can definitely, you build as you work on your family papers, and you learn more and more as you go.
Is there any way to try to, if you have a lot of stuff, how you determine if you want to keep it or toss it? Like, for example, I have a file of a bunch of pictures, like 8 by 10 pictures that were taken where my father worked. And I can see him in the pictures, but I have no idea who anybody else is. And I'm like, do I have to keep all of these?
Well, they're your papers, so you can definitely pick and choose what you want. I would suggest if you have other family members, they might not be interested in your father's work pictures, but you never know what other family members might be interested in. So before you discard anything, maybe just check with them. And the only thing with that is context. So maybe not keeping all of the photos, but maybe keeping a few just to show, you know, that this is the place that your father worked. And you never know down the line what person in those photos might be identified as someone not important, but, you know, noteworthy sort of thing. So it's keeping what's important to you and what is unique and original about your family.
Could I say maybe the local historical society where your father worked might be interested in some of those photos?
That's a good point too.
Thank you.
Especially if it's us.
Some companies also have archives sort of thing, so they may be interested in photos of their business. Another point that I forgot to make a little bit more clearly during the presentation is doing family papers to like A+ level can be a little expensive. Supplies aren't super cheap sort of thing. So doing the best that you can is what's important. So taking something out of an attic that's hot and just the humidity is just out of control where the paper just becomes so brittle, taking it out of that environment is going to make them last longer. So you might not have them in perfect archival boxes, but just taking them out of the basement will make them last longer. Also, taking something out of a dirty box and maybe brushing it off a little bit, and these little brushes aren't that expensive. You can order them from archival supplies, but art supply stores also have them. They're not the acrylic cheapo brushes, but I think I maybe paid $4 for this one, so not very expensive. And just, you know, gently brushing off dirt and placing it in a clean office supply will also make it last longer. But just so you know, things that you buy outside of an archival supply might say they're acid-free, but I wouldn't trust that. Acidity levels are something that can definitely change and do change over time. So do the best that you can with the budget that you can is important. Well, I think that's it as far as the question time. So last call, any questions? All right, Well, for more information and activities, please check out the museum's website at cincymuseum.org. Also follow us on social media. While on our website, definitely check out the museum's collection blog. It's called Off the Shelf, and you'll see all sorts of cool collection items. There's archival materials that we put up on there, as well as multiple science blogs and a little bit on preservation and conservation as well. And we can't wait to see you back at Union Terminal once CMC reopens. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on ticket sales to operate, and of course that revenue isn't possible right now. If you enjoyed this presentation, I hope you'll help support the Cincinnati Museum Center by donating at cincymuseum.org.